Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. How you doing today? This evening?
I'm back.
Yeah,
Did
she's
y'all
back.
miss
I missed you. It's hard doing this without you.
me? You missed me, babe.
I
Okay. I don't know about that, but we gonna go with it.
I'm gonna stay with it.
We gonna go with it. It's been a minute. I feel like
Feel like a stranger, huh?
I do. I feel like a stranger because it's been a minute
But you gotta
since I've been
realize
here.
you did a live last night, which was awesome.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, you and the therapist therapist. Shout out to her.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. We are excited to be here. I am Kia McLean.
Marcus.
So, we are going to be talking about grieving with a mate. Grieving with a mate. And as always, we are going to be requesting your interaction. And so, through the evening, we're going to be asking you all to, when you feel like we've said something that resonates, when you feel like we've said something that hits your spirit, we ask that you use hashtag grief. Use hashtag grief. And I like the other view better. Okay. We ask that you use the hashtag grief. If we drop something that resonates with you, we ask that you drop hashtag grief. If it's something that you connected with, otherwise, we are in the test group.
Say where?
We're not?
No, we're live.
Why did it say that?
I have no idea why it says that. All right. So everybody, we can pause for 30 seconds. What for? No.
That's right. Okay. Sorry about the interruption, y'all. That's kind of weird how it was showing up on my feed like that. My apologies.
No. All right. So you know how we are. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah, let's get to it.
All right. So let's recap the topic of tonight again. Our topic is grieving with a mate. This was one that was kind of different from me. I am fortunate enough to say I didn't have had a lot of grief with dealing with death in my life. I had a major person pass, which is Pop, you know. And when it comes to grieving with a mate, so at that point I was in a marriage, and my grieving process, but it's different from probably some others, at least in my mind. So when we go through this, I'm gonna share my point of view, and I think what a lot of males go through when grieving, because it's different. Mm-hmm. I believe for a male and a female, because a lot of times we have a masculine persona that tries to come out, and what happens when it comes, that masculinity comes out, you kind of submerge the grieving process and that healing things that needs to happen. And what we do is we lash out maybe, or we place blame or different thing or different excuses for what we could have did better. We could have did right. Do things we could have said. And I'll touch on that later. So I'm gonna let you lead this one, babe.
All right. Well, I've had a lot of grief, unfortunately, and I've lost a lot of people that are close to me. And these are some things that I've thought about because of being in a relationship with people as I grieved. And so I wanted to have this conversation. As always, I want to preface what we're going to say with eat the fish and throw the bones away. Whatever is not applicable to you, it does not apply. Whatever applies to you, let it marinate, let it simmer, and we ask that you drop hashtag grief to let us know you are still present in the room and that you're engaging and interacting with us. Can you do that for us? Yay! Engagement. All right. So, grief varies from person to person. Everybody deals with grief very differently. There's not a standard way of grieving. One of the things that I recognized, especially because I've had so much grief, I've lost so many people, is that this is something that we weren't really taught to deal with. We weren't really given like a blueprint. We weren't given any instructions on how to grieve properly. Now, if you're in church, there's a certain way that people in church have been taught to grieve. If you're not in church, there's no route to how to grieve. And I don't think there is any real lesson on grieving. Because I've lost a lot of people, I've really struggled with grief. It used to be extremely difficult for me. Over time, though, I have studied our ancestry in terms of how ancestors used to grieve. And why are you looking confused?
Because that's the first time I ever heard somebody say that. And
Yeah,
that's why
I think I mentioned this to you before. Like, I started to study how our ancestors grieved because I wanted to know, since there was nothing out there that talked about how to grieve, there was nothing out there. Like, how do we grieve? And so the study of our ancestors grieving, what gave me a little bit of clarity, unlike what we were taught in church, if you went to church. And so, and this kind of came about through my spiritual journey. But I just wanted to have a connection to how my people at some point dealt with grief. And they didn't deal with grief the way that we deal with grief now. Grief for our ancestors was a celebration. It was not this thing where you were like so sad and so upset. It was understanding that a transition had occurred. And so through that came a different understanding for me. And I'm still going through that process of learning and understanding that, but it has helped me. It has helped me through my process. But however, there are some points that I found helpful and that may be helpful to you on your own journey. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is when you're with someone, you should most definitely discuss, with your partner, this is how I've grieved in the past, or this is my grieving pattern, so that your partner is aware of how you grieve, because you will undoubtedly go through grief while in a relationship, in a marriage, whatever it may be. You're going to undoubtedly experience some grief. And so how do you go about being there for your partner during that time if you don't have that communication and understanding of what your partner may need? I think a lot of times what we do is it happens and then you just have to deal with it at that time. And you don't know what to do. And so we end up ultimately doing the wrong things, or the things that are just not as helpful. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But I wanted to start with having the dialogue with your partner first, so that there's an understanding that, hey, this is how I grieve. When I grieve, I typically go inward. When I grieve, I typically need to go away for a while. When I grieve, I cry a lot. When I grieve, I get angry. So that way, at least your partner is aware of what your grieving looks like. And then they can be better equipped to be present for you during that time.
I agree with that, because during the grieving process, the biggest thing that a mate is willing or needs is understanding. You have to have compassion and the awareness that it's not you, it's what the mate is going through. Um, with that being said, it's hard depending on how a person grieves. You know, for example, when my grandmother passed away, no, it was my grandfather passed away. I saw my dad he had an emotional outburst, and it wasn't a breakdown, just a general breakdown and cry. He had to hit the wall. He put a hole in the wall. It wasn't directed at my mom, and she knew that.
Mm-hmm.
He just had to. He just had the outburst. You know,
But she knew that how though.
they've been together forever and ever, and I don't know what might have happened in the past because over the years, prior to me becoming an adult or a stage of awareness, as in what's going on around the world, and because I was his dad, and at the time, his mother was still alive, so those were the closest parents. So his siblings were alive, so I don't know what other aspects. I don't know, so I don't know how she knew,
Mm-hmm.
but it was that outburst. She just knew, but that's like being together forever. So that's how you, because knowing your person,
Mm-hmm.
there's certain things you should understand. This is not the characteristic of his true self. It's it's those emotional roller coasters,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we got to understand. So, unfortunately, you have went through a more grieving process than I have. Undoubtedly, when it comes again through your stories of how you handled it, things you did, I know what you're going to do. I also know when you still have those moments of emotional, flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah, which we're going to be talking um, about how to identify certain things with your partner when they are in a stage of grief, right?
Right.
So the next point that I have here is the partner who has a grieving partner, do not take anything personal,
No.
right? We just kind of addressed that. However, communication is vital, and don't shut the other partner out. So you still have to communicate to your partner. You can't assume that they know. You can't make all these assumptions that they understand what you're going through. They understand, that this is a moment that you're down right now, that this is a moment that you need to be alone, that this, you still have to communicate. In order to be in a healthy, viable relationship, it's important that we are communicating with our mate and saying, I'm grieving right now. I need a moment. I'm I'm dealing with a little bit of depression, or I'm feeling down right now. Do you mind if I have the room to myself, if I get some space? But I think it's important that we use our words. And oftentimes we're not using our words in relationships. We're wanting our partners to make the assumption of how we're feeling, how we're doing, what's going on with us. And that is where the issues can come up for us, right? Because this is not to say that you don't have a right to grieve. However, I think it's important that we relate those feelings to our partner so that they're aware. Because the worst thing to do is have your partner in the dark and they're not sure, like, okay, well, do I say anything? Do I not? You don't want your partner to be scared or fear having conversations with you and bringing things up to you. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
That magic word that comes up in every live we do, every live you do, every live I do, that C word. Communication.
Yeah.
Um the problem is a lot of times we have the communication abilities of a kid.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see a kid
Agreed.
go and you be like, use your words. And that's what we're doing. We access use your words. If I'm shutting down, I need to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
You be like, use your words.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which I have communication skills of a kid. I'm hungry, but but we such being such a like I'm a introverted beast. So a lot of my things are inward, and I have to learn, which I'm starting to learn. I'm not good at it. I have to communicate that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have seen times where I had my emotional flashbacks of a grieving moment. I actually needed to just release,
Mm-hmm.
and you was there, and I don't need no more than that. Give me my 3 or 4 minutes. Let's rock on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just how I do it, and you
Yeah.
knew that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that came from us having conversations too, though, right? It wasn't like, because you were very clear with me about that. Like, oh, every now and then I have my moment,
Mm-hmm.
and so I just had to be present for you during that moment. And that's sure that's what you need. And we're gonna delve deeper as the more the conversation continues, but I want to go a bit before we get to that place. But I have some things bookmarked in my head about what we need to go back to. And then number 3, mistreating your partner is not a viable excuse for your grief, and discounting your partner's grief is not okay either. So we have to keep both of those things in mind. We have to be mindful that, I'm not going to discount what you feel, but I'm also not going to make you feel like it's not okay for you to grieve. I'm not going to make you feel like it's not okay for you to feel what you need to feel. But again, communication is huge. I think where we again go wrong is we assume that our partner will know, we assume that our partner will understand, we assume that our partner will just get it. And that's not always the case.
We use that phrase. She should know me by. She should know me by now.
So, going back to what you said earlier, that's why I said to you, how did she know? How did your mother know? And so that's why I asked the question, because was it an assumption? Was it because she just knew him, or was it because she just said, I'm going to let him do whatever it is he needs to do? And maybe it was an assumption on her end that she shouldn't say anything. But was it really communicated?
I don't know, but
it's not a question I'm
Okay.
asking you to answer. I'm just putting that out there that maybe that's what happens a lot of times, right? Think about, sometimes I get frustrated and you will just be like, okay, I'm just gonna let her go through that. And I didn't communicate anything to you. You just let me go through my frustration. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you know that I'm frustrated. You see what I'm saying? It just means that you're just like, she going through something. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna leave her alone. But what I'm saying is we should be communicating those things to each other. And that's even work that I still have to do. And that I'm constantly in work with, because I need to do better about communicating all of those things, so that the one thing you don't want to have is that your partner's in the dark and your partner's unaware.
So I'm curious of the people watching. Anybody ever had that conversation with their mate, saying, "This is how I grieve," or "This is what I do"? I'm just curious, because this is something that we're saying we all should have. If you're going to be that person, you have to understand this is what's going on.
Yeah, you have to. I think most of us, it may be ideal for us to have those conversations, but it's just not happening. Like, we might think, oh yeah, you need to have the conversation. Yeah, that's important. But
yeah, I mean, I know it's not happening, but for that to be a factor and be proven, mm-hmm. There are people who have done it, and the people who have succeeded at it, and they says, "Hey, I can testify that shit works."
Yeah. Well, as we wait for people to make any comments on that, we're going to keep it moving. I think the next point is creating a safe space for dialogue or helping your mate create something that will help them through their grief. And so my example is back in May, Mother's Day, I mentioned to you, in fact, I mentioned it last year, to be honest. For Mother's Day, one of the things I wanted to do to honor my grandmother was to start considering gardening, to start, getting plants. My grandmother loved plants. She loved gardening. We don't have a home with a yard. And so, hey, let's just start with the plant, right? And so I had the conversation with you though. And I said, hey, babe, I want to go to Lowe's or somewhere and get a plant. Like my grandmother loved gardening. She loved planting. That's one of the things I want to do to honor her. And that was something that we got to share in. So that was something you were able to share. You were able to share that experience with me. Even though you didn't know my grandmother, you had never met her, that was something that I shared with you by communicating with you that I wanted to do. Because although I'm not grieving the way that I was grieving before, I still have those moments where I wouldn't even necessarily call it grief at this moment. I would just call it more so like reminders. And so when that happens, I'm thinking, what can I do to remember her? Because I don't want to forget her and I don't want to grieve either. Right. But I want to honor her. I want to honor her memory. And so that's something that I wanted to do. And I was able to communicate that with you and say, hey, this is something that I want to do. And I honor, not as a grieving moment. Because, of course, yeah, we're going to have those grieving moments. But in this particular instance, this was something that happened prior to us getting together. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to communicate that with you. I was able to tell you, hey, this is what I need. This is what I feel. And you were able to be receptive to that and be a part of that moment with me.
And I understand because, that's something you do to honor your granny. Mm-hmm. As well, like me, in May and in August, I'm going to Texas Roadhouse. Mm-hmm. That's just what I do.
Exactly.
So that's why I honor Pop. So, hey, because one of the reasons, his favorite restaurant, and that's what's like, hold on. The last place I actually saw him, we kind of went to, hold on a sec. Take it over for a bit.
Okay. And so this is the things that can come up for us, even as we have the discussion about grief, right? Those emotions can come up. I think the other part that I want to highlight is, and when Marcus comes back, we can talk about how men sometimes struggle with their emotions overall. And so as it pertains to grief, it can sometimes be a struggle for them. And they're not always honest about that, which can be to their detriment and then the people that are around them, because it's okay to grieve, right? It's natural for us to miss our loved ones. It's natural for us to go through the process of bereavement. And we have to give each other permission. We have to give each other the space to be able to grieve. And we can't be judgmental. We can't be harsh. We can't be, well, this happened to me and this, I understand how it feels. You don't understand how it feels. This happened to me. This was my relationship with this person. And so that varies. Okay. And so we have to understand that across the board, grief changes. Grief varies. Even for me, there used to be a time I couldn't even talk about grief without sobbing. Literally, there would be people, I would mention their names, I couldn't get through it. And so we have to understand that, like, we go through these different processes and um these different waves of our grief, right? No matter how long time has passed, no matter what's happened in between, grief is just that. It hits you like that. It can hit you like that. I can be driving in the car, hear a song, see something that reminds me of a loved one that's gone, and all of a sudden, it's almost like the grief of that loss hit me again. So you never know when it's going to come up. But one of the things that I think is important though is that I can be able to communicate and say to Marcus, I'm having a moment. I'm having a moment. I was thinking about my brother. I was thinking about my grandmother. I was thinking about my grandfather, whoever it may be. I was thinking about them. And I need to just go sit in the park. Or will you go do this with me? It'll make me feel better. Just having that conversation and that open dialogue, I think is important. And if anybody has, had that experience, it's important that, we share those experiences to help each other out through that. Did you have anything to add to that, Beth?
No. So when I was researching this and dealing with this, it was like one of the things I seen common was stories. Listen, a lot of times when people are going through something, they tell stories about the good times or the things they had. Like you tell me about your grandmother's plants, how she loved to get on her knees, even though she was up in age, she would get on her knees. And I might have heard that story 5 times, but I know you need to talk about it. And I'm gonna listen like it's the first time, I ever heard it. So things like that, or things your brother did, or things your brother said. I really know when you think about it because you'll reference some of his quotes or some of his adventures.
Yeah.
So this is all about knowing you, and you have no conversation. Say, this is how I go through stuff and how I talk about it, how I deal with it.
Yeah.
You're a storyteller. That's your MO.
So we're going to move on to number 5 that I have on my list, and what I consider to be the most important of all on my list. So I'm going to preface this with, this is not to offend anyone. This is not to insult anyone. This is not to judge anyone. However, we are talking about some of our experiences personally and individually. I mean, as a couple and, individually. And one of the issues that I have always had is those cliche things. And the cliche things are connected to people's various beliefs. And so oftentimes when people lose a loved one, depending on where you are in your journey, whatever your journey may be, there are these cliche statements that people make. And I think it is only for these particular set of people. And we have to be very careful, about saying things to people generally without having an understanding. And so this is not just for your mate. This is just overall, this particular comment, about they're in a better place. Some people may be open to you saying that. Some people may find peace and resolve in that comment, while others may find that that comment is hurtful. There are those cliche statements that people say that say, well, it was just their time. And again, while that may be comforting to some people, it may not be comforting to others. And so we just encourage people to have conversations with people out, even if it's not your mate. This is across the board as far as I'm concerned. Have conversations with people, or have a knowing and understanding of people before saying certain things, because I think we think that it's helpful, and sometimes people struggle with what the right words to say, and I realize that. And so that's why I decided to go and study, like, what did our ancestors do when they were grieving, when a death happened? What were their things? And a lot of the things that they did was they had huge celebrations. They had huge celebrations. And so there wasn't this funeral and open casket and um singing and crying. They didn't do that. They had a very different way of celebrating and honoring their dead loved ones. And so I think it's important that we just pay attention to people, honor people, respect people, and communicate with people, so that we're not saying things or doing things that can be even more hurtful for people during a time of difficulty. Because grief is a lot. Anybody that has dealt with grief, you know, I know one person in my life that deals with grief, or I'll say doesn't really deal with grief. They feel like with every death, that's that person's time, and they don't cry about it. They don't have funerals about it. And this is a Black person. They don't cry, they don't have a funeral, they don't deal with grief the way I know a lot of people do. And so to say that to that type of person would probably be offensive to them, because they don't see grief the way some people see it. And so you have to be very careful and mindful of what you're saying to people. And specifically, if you're dealing with your mate, just communicate with them. Just find out what is their way of going through the grieving and mourning stage.
All right. So listening to your stories, and when we talk about other people having people passed away, I learned which are like some of the trigger words.
Mm-hmm.
And part of being present when your partner is grieving is being mindful of those trigger words. So sometimes I believe silence is best in lieu of saying something dumb.
Mm-hmm.
That's or triggering. I won't say the triggering.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Because especially in the grieving process, like you and I talked about, anger is one of the emotions that a lot of times people go through.
Yeah.
And you don't know when that anger is going to come up, because the grieving process and the bereavement thing is it fluctuates between people. How I do it and you do it is going to be two sides of a coin of death.
Do you think it matters who passed away that affects that? Like, do you think a person should be mindful depending on who passed away, or do you think it doesn't matter?
That's a good question. Knowing you, I don't think it should matter, because well, I'm actually on the fence on that one, because certain things I'm not going to say to you, no matter who passed away.
Okay, let's find out from our listeners. What do you think it matters what you should say to your partner depending on who passed away, or do you think that doesn't matter? Because I don't think it matters who passed away. I think what matters is the fact that if I share it with you that I lost a particular person, whether it was a friend or whether it was a family member or whatever it may be, I think it doesn't really matter, right?
Okay.
Grief is grief. And I think, yeah, somebody that is dealing with the loss of a parent versus dealing with the loss of a coworker or a friend, people might lump that into categories. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So Cassandra said, I don't think it matters. So, because I think people immediately go to, well, it wasn't an immediate family member. Think about this. At your job, they have a bereavement policy.
Yes.
The bereavement policy honors who? Typically, at a job, who does the bereavement policy honor?
Immediate family, mother, father, spouse, brother, sister, right? And no child.
Yep. Okay. So in the instance for me, going back to my childhood, who was my father?
Right. So your uncle was probably your biggest father influence.
My uncle served as far as I was concerned, my uncle was my uncle father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I to be?
You're like his mother.
I'm his aunt mother. So that's why I said and asked the question, does it matter about the relationship status? Because different people have different relationships with different people. Some people were raised by their friend's mom. Some people were raised by their aunt or uncle. And then I want to address one of these comments before you go. Cassandra said, your partners need to just be there to listen and comfort you, regardless of who it was. Absolutely. That's what I think.
True. So I think what threw me off with the question, that wasn't necessarily the relation, but how close they were to you. So if you just had an acquaintance die, and I say, "Oh, they went to a better place," would it be that triggering for you? Like, that's still a dumbass thing to say. Whereas if somebody close to you now said it, you can get upset. And with me, you like, you know better to say that to me.
So personally, I don't think it should be said to me, right?
Right.
I don't think it should be said to me from a friend, from a partner. I don't think you telling me that they're in a better place is comforting. Because I don't know where they are, and you don't know where they are.
I ain't trying to find out no time soon.
Okay. So even if you believe whatever, we do not know where they are. Okay. Let's just make that very clear. We don't know where they are. We have been told certain things. We may have read certain things, but we haven't been anywhere yet to determine where that place is. Can we agree on that?
Very much so.
Okay. So because the way my mind thinks, I don't like the comment, they're in a better place, because I don't know what that place is. You don't know where that place is. How do I know if that place is better or worse? So that's why I don't really like that comment, because nobody really knows where it is. We've had people say, oh, I died and I came back to life and all of these different things. But at the end of the day, we don't know. That is the only reason I don't like that comment. I don't like other cliche comments like, well, it was their time. I don't like that either. Who are you to determine what was somebody's time? And who am I to determine that? We don't know that. And so I think we have to be very careful about when somebody just lost somebody that they love and care about. We have to think about the comforting words to say rather than those cliche. We've just got accustomed to cliche comments, and we've embraced the cliche comments because that's all we knew. That is why I started to study how my ancestors practiced grief, because that gives me a point of reference. Nothing else has given me a point of reference like studying what the ancestors did, because everything else it's just a bunch of hearsay and all of that. And so that's why we have to be in communication with our partner and say, so if you are a person that wants to hear that, then communicate that with your partner. I would love for you to say, my mother is in a better place when she dies. Then your partner will say that to you. But if that's something that you don't like, you already know I don't like that. So you're not going to say that to me. If my mother dies, you will not say, well, she's in a better place, because that's going to be a trigger for me. And that's because we've communicated. So I think ultimately that's really what it's about. There are people who would be absolutely fine with you saying, well, your mom is in a better place. They would be okay with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's also people like me who don't like that, who don't feel comforted by those words. And at the end of the day, it's about being able to comfort your partner, being able to even comfort your friends in that time and during that season. And so by me communicating that to people outside of even you, my friends, my close friends know not to say that to me, because I've made it clear. Like, they may have said it in the past, and then I said, please don't say that to me going forward. I would appreciate it if you don't say that, because that's triggering for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important that we honor and respect, what people need during that time, because the bereavement is not about you and you. It's about the person that's actually grieving in that moment, right? So
can you read that comment?
Keldrick said, first of all, we have no idea where they went, so I have always disliked that comment. I mean, that, I'm not going to say across the board everybody should dislike that comment, but for me personally, because again, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't say those things to people who they feel might be comforted by those words, but it's not a comforting phrase to me. In fact, it really angers me. It upsets me. I had people say that to me in my last two recent deaths that I dealt with, and it just really upset me. It was very triggering for somebody to tell me, well, they're in a better place, Kia. It just was for me. But if I said it to you, I don't think that it would matter one way or the other. You're very like, but I think that there may be work for you in that space to be honest with yourself about what your grieving process actually looks like. Because let's talk about that now, about how men may hold their feelings in.
Oh, my turn.
Your turn.
Okay. It's kind of hard to follow a lot of words in my mouth, and I can't say them all at one time. So, when trying to be strong, a lot of times we try to be strong and we try to bottle that vulnerability up. And like I said before, it may come out wrong. And one of the things I'm going to do next time is to be honest with my feelings and be honest with the person I'm with. Mm-hmm. Because for the mistake I made trying to be strong and trying to be cocky was, for example, when my father passed away, I took, my bereavement days. Actually, hell, I worked up till the time of his funeral because, like, okay, I'm trying to be like, okay, it's death, it's normal. Me and him was good. We can go rock. We can rock on. I can handle my business. Because one of the ways I actually deal with death is I internalize it. You would never know in a general conversation that I'm dealing with death. One-on-one. Anybody around me, my personality will not change. I'm going to be the same bullshitting person as anyone. But your feeling's still there. And what's happening is I need to release. Mm-hmm. I need to talk about it, because not saying that I'm hurting like to the point where I'm going to tear something up. I just need to, at some point in time as a man, need to vent. Um, Another mistake that we do when we're trying to be strong is like, oh, I'm good. I don't need you around.
Mm-hmm.
Go and do what you gotta do. I can handle it. Don't worry about it. But our mate is our support system. That's that
Your
when he,
partner.
yeah, you're going to be my crutch. I'm hurting. I'm limping through life. You're my crutch till I can get well again. Not, oh, I'm in pain, but I can take it, or this is right. Because one of the things that a man will do is, um, for instance, this is an example. This is an example I went through, and I had to have a conversation, or I had to have a conversation was brought to me later on when my wife at the time was like, "I can't get off." And I said, "Don't worry about it." Cause I'm like, that's first my thing. My mom was like, "They don't give you briefing for your
Father-in-law.
in-law,"
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not gonna question it. Whatever, I can handle it on my own. Went to the funeral, and when I was at the funeral, people were like, "Where your woman at?" Oh, she had to work. I told her to stay. She had to work. She couldn't get off. I told her, "Don't worry about it." And my mind is like, your ass could take off a vacation and go here and there, but you can't find a way to get off. When I need you, can call in sick or something. But I'm like, okay, whatever. But in turn, it starts to make a resentment. And because I was trying to be strong and like I don't need it, but now my who I needed for my crutch, now it's turned into a resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that was on me. That was on nobody but me. Like, if something like that happened again, I should be able to tell you, no, bring your ass. I need you. No, call in sick or something. We'll figure it out later. We'll figure anything else out.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you that you ain't nowhere like that. You be like, shit, man, I'm like, move out the way. I'm driving. Get out the way. We'll get there quicker.
Absolutely.
Right. So I get it, but we have to let our other person in, let our partner in. You because what also happens is we actually going to grieve hardest later.
After.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
because when you break down, it's going to break down. It's going to hit hard. It's like almost like a car. Like you've ever been in a car wreck or
Mm-hmm.
something.
And it hurts later.
It hurts later because your adrenaline's going. This is I gotta take care of this and that. When it's all said and done, you just breathe. It's like bow.
So before you go further, I want to go back to what you said and I want to address it. So I made some notes so I didn't interrupt you. And you said you're trying to be strong and that that's a lot of men's attempt is to try to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, who are you trying to be strong for?
Because you're the rock.
Like,
You're the rock of a household. You know, you're supposed to be able to handle all emotional situations. You're supposed to be when everything is tearing down or everything's coming falling. You're there to like hold that wall up. And you sometimes you don't necessarily need to see. You don't want to show that you are emotional. And I know our biggest thing in recent history is for us men to be more vulnerable. But but we was remember traditionally wasn't trained to be that vulnerable like that. You know, when men go to war, we supposed to be strong. You know, we're taught, you know, is death. You know, stop all that damn crying.
mm-hmm.
You know, especially the favorite one. What the hell are you crying for?
So I guess my question is probably a little deeper, and maybe those who are watching live can share in my questioning of this. Because when men say they have to be strong for the family and they have to be strong for the household and they have to be strong for, like, I think even that needs to be communicated. Like, because again, my expectation of my partner would be not be for you not to cry or for you not to have feelings or emotions if you're grieving. And so I think like that is the opportunity, even though I see other opportunities for that to exist. I think that is the opportunity. That is definitely an opportunity for you to be honest about your emotions and be vulnerable and open enough to grieve. Because what happens is, you already know where I'm going with this, is when you don't heal, when you don't go through the stages of healing, then those emotions, those set of emotions go somewhere else. They're misplaced. Right? And so that's how the anger comes out. That's how your dad hit the wall and put a hole in the wall, possibly. Because instead of you coming to me and saying, if we're together and you have the unfortunate loss of someone, and you come to me and say, babe, I'm really struggling with this loss. Well, you have to trust me enough to give you the space to feel what you need to feel, right?
I hear you. So
why do you need to be strong, and why do men feel the need to be strong when they have a mate that they know would be there? I guess that's the part I'm trying to understand. Like, I get it that you guys just feel like you got to be strong and you got to be like, hey, I got to do this and I got to handle all of these things.
Oh, so check this out. What you just said you would expect or wanted is not taught but learned. It's not taught but learned. Let's think about that.
Okay.
These things that are emotions that I'm gonna show you, who the hell gonna see them?
Me.
Who else?
You.
Nobody else. The children. Will the children ever see that? The young man I'm raising, will he see that? Will I have that conversation with, hey boy, I had to go have a cry with your mama for a little while. That's not taught. It's learned. You usually learn through situations in life. It's not taught, it's learned.
Okay, so, but I understand what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
Like, I get what you're saying, and I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around why, not necessarily why, but because I'm not going to even talk about all relationships or all people and all men. Now it's me and you.
Okay.
So in this relationship, if I think that I'm not going to even say I think, I believe I have made space for you to feel comfortable to be honest enough about what your emotions are, and for you to be able to communicate those emotions. And so I think if a woman makes you feel safe and she makes you feel like you can communicate those feelings, then now what's stopping you?
47 years of the opposite shit. 45
now,
years.
I mean, I can deal with that answer.
45 years of the opposite, doing the opposite shit.
I can deal with that answer.
You're not going to do it 2 years. 2 years don't equate to 45.
Okay.
I can make it accelerate the process because I make strides. Being with you, I made leaps and bounds. You open the door, but hell, I have to learn to walk through it. I can see the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So now I got to know, is that a open door or is it just a window or a glass door?
Gotcha. But okay, so that's good. I think we had a moment there, but I think it's important that we go back to where we started, which is communicating with your partner. Communicating with your partner about what your needs are, and so that your partner is actually there for you. And so Lawrence says, if you say that someone or something is masculine, you mean that they have qualities such as strength or confidence, which are considered typical of men. Yeah, like I'm aware of that. And that's why I'm asking the question, like, from a personal stance, like, do men feel like when they get in these relationships that they're with someone that they can share something differently than what they're sharing with the world? Even something differently than they're sharing with their children. Can you share with your mate, your partner, your most vulnerable state so that they can help you through the grieving process, so that they can be there? Because here's the thing that I often wonder about. If you're grieving, are you allowing space for your partner to even be there to support you? Are you even allowing the space for your partner to be that support? Like you mentioned how your ex-wife didn't take off work or whatever, and you're like, oh, she can take off for vacations and all of this, but you have to be honest first.
And that's what
You
I
know,
said.
and I know that's what you said, but I'm just saying, like, because I'm talking to the people too. This ain't just a conversation between me and you.
I got caught up in that.
I see
I got
that.
caught up in you, baby.
But I mean, I think we have to be honest about that, because I know that that's happened to some other people that I know, that they weren't honest about it, and then they resented their partner about not being honest because they didn't want to be vulnerable in that moment. But are you choosing the partner that you can be vulnerable with? Do you trust the person that you're with so that you can have that open, honest dialogue to be able to say, you know, I'm hurting right now, babe. I lost my cousin. I lost my brother. I lost my whoever. And, you know, not feel like you're going to be berated, or not feel like it's not permissible for you to have a moment. And so I think, like, this is a long conversation. I think a longer conversation than an hour can take us. But I did want us to address the issue, because I think when you don't start having the conversation, when we first got together, I was grieving. So we're going to close there. When we first got together, I was still grieving. I was still grieving my grandmother, and I was still grieving someone that I had dated for years, on and off. But nevertheless, I was still grieving. And I was honest with you about that up front. And I communicated to you that I had an array of emotions, and I shared some just deeper personal things that had occurred, so that there was some context to my grieving, to my process of going through, you know, kind of releasing and being able to move through that grief. And I think that was both helpful and honest for our relationship. Because had I not told you, hey, I'm grieving this and I'm grieving that and I'm going through this, then you would have been worried, like, okay, what's going on with you? What's happening here, right?
In hindsight, yes.
Yeah.
Now you put it that way, because you were so upfront with it, it just dawned on me that if you had did it a different way, how would I have felt? It just really, it's the first time I really just thought about that. If you, because you're so honest on everything, I don't know what I would have thought about. Is she wrapped tight? That might have been a thought. Like, she wrapped tight, or she just half a crazy, you know. But because you were dealing with things,
yeah.
But if you hadn't, but because you was honest and let me know what's going on, I was able to be understanding and giving your space and let you handle your things that you need to handle. And so, yeah.
And you were able to comfort me through that. You were able to be the person that I needed you to be through that process, because I was honest with you and I communicated with you, because I felt safe. And I think both people should feel that. Both people, the man should feel safe with his person, and the woman should feel safe with their person, especially through grief.
Stop right there. So this is something I see. We both have seen this. We need to get to the space with our mate when you're going through this emotional grief, this grief.
Mm-hmm.
Your first person that you go to should be your partner and nobody else. And I see that a lot that's not happening. So, and which leads to question, is that your person? I'm not saying it is or it's not. Don't get it twisted.
Mm-hmm.
But I would feel, I don't know if would I should I feel some type of way if when you're at the most vulnerable place in your existence at that moment, I am not your bed where you could just lay your head down and say, "Hey, babe, this was happening." So that's maybe another question. That might be some question for the dark therapist.
Yeah.
Because that's puzzling to me because I might have even been in that space at one time. It's like when I'm feeling this emotion, I'm not going to the person I'm with. I'm going to somewhere outside of that. Not necessarily, why? I know we got our best friends. We tell, like me, I tell certain people this. No, if very few people get all of me.
Mm-hmm.
But at that moment, you should be the first person I say, it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It happened.
Right. And that's all I was saying is, I mean, and not only that, it's like to have the trust and understanding of that person. I want to address Lawrence's comment here. A man should have a safe place to share his emotions with the woman in his life. A woman is a natural nurturer. It should never be used against him or looked upon him as weak. Choosing the right woman is very, very important. I agree. Yeah. And so that's to my point about, like, if I'm not the person that you feel comfortable grieving with and being honest with and communicating with, and I'm not, and you're not the person that I feel like I can be honest with and communicate with and grieve with, then there's an issue. Because you should be able to do that with your person without the judgment, without feeling like this is not a safe space, and without you feeling like I have to be Tarzan. I think, like, that's a thing for not just you as a man, but some other men. It's okay to be that with your person. If not, that may be an issue, because I don't want my man to constantly be on strong 100% of the time. I need to see you vulnerable. I need to see you feeling that you could be honest about your emotions, about your feelings, and about whatever it is that you might be enduring, because then I know he trusts me. Then I know he feels safe here. Then I know that, especially when the moment of grief comes up, you just said it. You calling me. You ain't calling nobody else. You're looking to me to be your support through that process of grief. I'm looking to you to be that person through my process of grief. Like, we've already talked about, hey, these are certain triggers for me. So you already know I'm not going to say this to her if she's grieving. I'm not going to do that while she's grieving, because I've communicated that to you. I'm a I talk a lot. I talk a lot. That's known. We all know that. I talk a lot, but I'm very upfront. I am a very upfront person. I'm going to tell you, hey, this is what I need. This is what's important to me. This is a little background information so that we're on the same page. And so there's no confusion about that, and there's no misunderstanding about it. And so we're past 8:00. We need to close this thing out, but because it's just so much context to this conversation. And so I want to do a recap real quick. If you guys missed the beginning of this, please go back and watch the replay. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast channel. But a quick recap is: discuss how you process grief with your partner before grief occurs, because we all know it's going to occur. So have that discussion. I grieve like this. This is how I process grief. This is all of these things, right? And so we have to, be sure that we're doing that. And so Lawrence says, I agree, Marcus, your partner should be your best friend. You should always be the first person to know when something isn't going well. Never create private relationships. It will destroy the integrity and trust in relationship. Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lawrence. Good show. He said, good show.
All right, all right.
Our number 2 point, a partner who has a grieving partner, do not take anything personal. However, communication is important and don't shut your partner out. Number 3 point, mistreating your partner is not a viable excuse for grief, and discounting your partner's grief is not okay either. And I want to say this real quick. I was married to my second husband, and he said something to me I'll never forget. When my brother passed away, he said, "So you still grieving? You still sad?" It was literally like maybe a week after his passing. And I just thought, like, I don't feel safe with you. Like, you didn't make me feel safe. But whose fault was that? Okay, I won't even go there. That was my fault. Because
another show. Go ahead.
Yeah, another show. Another conversation.
Yep.
Number 4 point, create a safe space for dialogue or help your mate create something that will help them through their grief. And the example that I used was my grandmother and how I had a conversation with you and I said, "Hey, babe, let's go to Lowe's. I want to get a plant. And this is my way of memorializing my grandmother." And you were there for me through that process. And number 5, the most important of all is last, those cliche things that people say. Be careful and just know your person. Those cliche things may not work for your partner. Your partner may not want to hear they're in a better place. It was time. Like, just be careful. Your partner may like those things and they may embrace those things, but your partner may not embrace those things. So have the communication, have the dialogue. Either way is okay, whatever way you like it, but just be honest and communicate that so that you're not like, well, why would they say that to me? I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know why they said that to me. That was hurtful. Certain things that are cliche can be hurtful to people. So just be careful about those things. If your partner is perfectly okay with you saying they're in a better place, say it. It's okay. But if you know your partner would not be okay with that, please reserve those comments for people who might embrace that, because not everybody embraces those comments. Okay. Have anything else, babe?
My most important is be present.
Be present.
Be present. And when I'm not talking present for the day, be present for the process. Because you may be in for a long haul, but being a mate is a forever endeavor. So be present, be patient.
Be present, be patient. I love that. That's a great closeout, man.
All right. So with that being said, high five. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe. Oh, FYI, we are now doing lives simultaneously on YouTube. So if you have friends, family, partners, mates who are not part of the Facebook group, they can watch the lives now on YouTube simultaneously as we're doing it on Facebook. And as always, subscribe, give us a shout out, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.